Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to try to set up um, a little bit more control with the column breaking apart. So if we go into the Autodop network here, and let's lay this out a little bit nicer. We have the ground plane on one side that is a static mesh, and then or a static solver. And then we have our rigid bodies, in this case, our column breaking apart. And then we're merging everything together, gravity and so forth. So basically we need to first get all of this to stick together so that we can um, have it not break, and then we want it to break only when we decide we want it to break and where we want it to break. So to do that, inside of the rigid bodies tab on the shelf, we have a button here that's called glue adjacent, and that's going to glue um, rigid bodies that are adjacent to each other to stick together. So I'm going to click on that, and then it's going to tell me to select an RBD objects to glue together, and I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to push return. Oops. I'm going to do that, but in the viewport, and then it won't go into the node. There we go. So now that we've done that, we have everything that we had before up here plus the output node. But then we have all these glue constraints. If we look at the object level here, we have a few new nodes as well. We have the glue column. So if we go into the glue column, this is actually, let me just show that one geometry that's in here. It creates a piece of geometry that connects the center of each piece, and this is what's gluing everything together. And then as soon as the bonds are broken, then they start falling apart. So let's look at how this works now. So if I play it, it stays together. Okay, going back into the Autodop network here, in this glue constraint here, we can adjust the strength of our glue strength here. And let's say I bring this really low to something like 10. And I run this simulation now. And you can see it does fall apart, but we don't really get much control over it. I mean, we can try to increase this, maybe go to 500 and see what happens. And we can do a little bit of control by doing that. And you can see that it's kind of breaking a little bit different because it takes a lot more to make it fall apart. And actually that's pretty cool. But maybe, let's say we wanted it to kind of start falling apart from the top down, whereas right now it's always going to kind of break from the bottom. Obviously it's falling. If I adjusted the height a little bit so that way it would be right on the ground, we wouldn't have that issue. So let's go back into our column, and I have a transform node, and let's go on to the front view so that we can, in this transform node, adjust the height just right. So it's too much. Bring that there. So I'm going to go back to the perspective view and run the simulation again, and we should see that now that it's on the ground, or maybe it's a little bit too much into the ground. let's go into the column, and I'm going to go to other objects so that we can see this, and in the transform node, try to adjust it. Maybe that number is too high, so I can get a little bit more control. So that should be a lot closer. Let's try that now. I'm going to go back to the beginning and push play. Now it's falling apart just on its own weight, so that's good. Something that we can do, which is a little bit counterintuitive, if we want this to completely stay together and not break until we tell it to, we can try to increase this really high, and that may or may not work. But what you can do is put it at -1, and at -1 this glue strength is at 100%, so it will not break until we tell it to break and break the connections. So how do we break the connections? Well, we have this node here that says remove broken. So when you go here, remember that geometry we were looking at a little bit ago? We have that there. And then we have the delete broken node. I'm going to get rid of that node for now, and we're going to rebuild a whole structure for us. So I'm going to create a box, and let's do a attribute transfer, and in this box here I'm going to make it with the color node, and this color node, actually let's not do it with the color node, let's do it with a point sop. So with this point sop here, or not for manufacture points, sorry about that, I'll push tab and do point, there we go, and we want this point here. On the keep color, we're going to go to add color, and I'm going to delete the channels here and add a 1 on the red, so we have a red cube here. When we do the attribute transfer, we can see that it's transferring the red values there. What we can do is look under conditions and adjust the distance threshold, because it's really high right now. So maybe we'll bring it down so that it's only affecting a small area. And then I'm going to add a transform node over here. And what I'm going to do with this is be able to animate where this cube is. And now looking at where the how big the distance is, this is probably still too high. Do like 0.5, and you can see that it's not affecting that much in an area, but what I can do is maybe adjust the scale a little bit. Because it's transferring the point data, that's why it's disappearing. So what I want to do is I'll bring it back to 1. and you can see that it's kind of only affecting if we look at where the cube is, close to where the cube is there. So maybe I am going to have to do the attribute transfer a little bit higher, but I'll just be careful with where I position it. So let's do this at like point, let's do 1. That works fine because it gets all the points that I need in that range. Okay, so I'm going to go to the transform node here and move it up. So when it starts off, it's going to be way at the top. I'm going to set a keyframe here by pushing Alt and clicking on that channel. And then let's say maybe it takes 2 seconds to collapse all the way. So I'm going to go to frame 48, and I'm going to bring this down to 0, and then I'm going to push Alt and click on that channel. So what we should see happening now is when we play, it's going to go through the object right now. Right now it's not breaking anything, but we are going to do that right now. So let's add an attribute promote. And what that's going to do for us is take our point data that we have in the color and move it up to the primitive level. So that way it has the point data and we can adjust what is happening in the primitive level, which we want to be able to delete. So right now we don't have anything that it is deleting yet. What we have to do is tell it what we want to delete. And in this case, I'm going to do an @ symbol, CR, is it C.R is greater than 0. So anytime the color is greater than 0, and let's look at this point stop here, because right now we have 1, 0, 0, and then when we transfer, we go here, but in this one, let's add a point stop as well, because we want it to be able to start off at black. Oh, I accidentally edited a expression there. Let's do that. Look at that. Look at this. And let's delete the channels here. Although that, yeah, there we go. Now make that black now. And then we're transferring the data here, and then we go to delete. Right now it hasn't deleted anything, but as it goes down, it should delete, and it's not. So let's double check the expression here in the delete node. Actually, I believe this is cd.r. cd is your color, and then .r is the channel. So let's try that and see what happens. Still nothing yet. Let's try one more time. Okay, so I'm back. I think what was going on is that here we didn't tell it what attribute to promote. So we got to tell it that it's going to be the color. And now let's check that one more time. And that's not breaking, so let's just do, instead of specifically color for red, we can do just color is greater than 0. and all our errors have gone away. So let's go back to the beginning, and if we play through, we can see that it breaks it that way. So that's perfect. Again, let's kind of look at what's happening here. Here we have the original geometry. In this point stop here, I just turned all the points back black. Then I also have a box. In this point stop, I made it red. Here I animated the box going from top to bottom. In the attribute transfer, what I'm doing is transferring the color from the red object to the red box to the column. Then we're doing an attribute promote where we got the original name, CD for color, and we're telling it to move it from the point level to the primitive level. And then here we're telling it to take the CD parameter that we adjusted, which is color, and anything that has a value greater than 0. So when we look at the point stop here for the column, you can see that color is 0 all the way across, whereas with the box, there's a 1 in red, so that makes it greater than 0. So as long as it's greater than 0, delete it. And when we look at the animation now, we can see that the bonds break as it goes through the object here. So let's look at our object level and see what happens with our simulation now. Well, that's not very exciting, is it? That's not the ground plane, but let's check in the Autodot network and see what's happening here. So we are outputting here. Does this give us... It is being affected by gravity. Warning, cooked in immediate mode, cache results incorrect. Let me pause the video and figure out what's going on. Okay, I'm back. I got it to work. I really didn't change anything. There was a warning here that was saying that the cache was looking wrong because it was baked to immediate or something like that. What I did was brought this back into a positive number and then put it back at -1, and it seemed to clear up the error that we saw here in the broken geometry. But other than that, I didn't change anything. I really kind of changed it and brought it back in the glue strength. But let's look at the animation now to kind of see what's happening. You can see that it's breaking from the top to the bottom. And the object mode, let's put the Autodot network instead of the column. So here we can see the whole simulation, and it breaks from the top to the bottom. If we wanted to kind of adjust this, we can always go back into the remove geometry node and play around with the settings here. So maybe I'll delete the channels here really quick, and it starts off here, and maybe with 2 seconds it was a little bit too fast. Maybe I'll do it with a few more frames there, or a lot more frames. And actually at frame 1 I want to set a keyframe, and all the way at 120 or so. I'm going to bring this down to 0 and set a keyframe. And then I'm going to go back to the object level to kind of see what is happening now. And you can see that it's slightly different, but it's adjusting the timing there. And you can really do any animation with that attribute transfer to be able to get the column to break a little bit differently in each way. Cool. So that is it for this lesson. We'll see you in the next one.